So while the Buddha's talking about these things, that person tunes into it. And the Buddha like literally elevates their state of consciousness to put them in this prepared kind of state for awakening to stream entry. So if we like can kind of tune in together for this journey and see like how much can we tune into this journey that the Buddha's describing here. So again, it's like the person sits down, attunes to it, and then the Buddha would speak about generosity on Dana. And when we tune into that quality of Dana, the fully actualized quality of generosity, in the six recollections, the Buddha would talk about generosity is like, what a gain, a great gain for me. Then a world filled with people stained by selfishness, I abide freed from the stain of selfishness, open-handed, generous, given to charity. So generosity has this quality of like unburdening, opening, like this open-handedness, not like holding on to things, gathering, but really like just this inclination, this willingness to offer, whether that's our time, our service, our resources, just this generosity is this first step of like letting go of a sense of like freedom, just like to give, to give, to give. And also, I'm sure all of us has experienced in one way or another is that when we really like give ourselves to generosity or the spirit of generosity, there's also a joy that comes from it. There's a sense of happiness. So generosity has this like losing of self-concern about my time, my resources, this very constricting mental state. And when we tune in to this quality of generosity, nourish it, and kind of go full force with it, it can have this sense of like opening, of freedom, and joy. So that person, so the Buddha would speak on generosity, and I'm sure there was many, many varieties for each individual that the Buddha would speak on generosity, which would really touch them and resonate within their being. So that quality of generosity present within that person would just feel so nourished, so alive, so like prominent. They would just be like a ball of generosity. The whole being would be resonating, ringing, brightening with generosity, listening to the Buddha speaking. And then the Buddha would move on to virtue. And yeah, the quality of sila, of virtue. The Buddha would describe, as we talked about last week, of when we sufficiently develop the quality of virtue, the Buddha described there was a development of a sensitivity to the bliss of ease, that there's a pleasure, a bliss that can come forth when virtue becomes like a more intimate and deeper quality of our being. We really feel at our core a sense of like we are aligned with virtue, aligned with morality, even beyond just the precepts which create the fence. But virtue is also, as said in other suttas, like the gradual training, it's also the development of character qualities. So when this morality and virtuous character feels like intimate, really at our core, and we feel it with feel it with all of our being. And as described also in the suttas and the recollections, to deepen this quality of the connection with virtue, pamoja, which is the quality of appreciating and taking joy in virtue, can actually really support and actually feeling that one is virtuous. Because so often we can actually be living a virtuous life, but kind of deep inside, we still feel kind of guilty. Yeah. We still feel like we're kind of doing bad things because there can be a lot of conditionings. So it's kind of like when we add virtue as an emphasis and priority in our life, there can be like a lot of other stuff also. So it's kind of like we're virtuous out here, but we don't feel we haven't like fully let in the virtuous nature of our being to our core. So this appreciating of our virtuousness and also our aspiration and inclination towards morality, the appreciating and taking joy in it, brings it closer and closer to our heart, makes it more and more intimate. And the metaphor the Buddha would use for someone who has really intimated and brought to one's core the quality of virtue, he said it's like a king walking through a land he has totally like brought to order, that is peaceful and prosperous, and the sense of safety he would feel as he goes through his country. So that's like implying a sense of like innocence, of safety, of goodness. So the Buddha, while giving this step-by-step graduated discourse, so the person already attuned to that sense of generosity, openness, that kind of lightening, unburdening, like inclination towards letting go, and a kind of joy from that. And then with virtue, it's almost like that heart that was lightened then gets to connect to its goodness, a sense of goodness, wholesomeness associated with virtue. And with that goodness, wholesomeness, a sense of innocence. And it's kind of like tuning into these two qualities. There can be a sense of like elevation of the chitta, a sense of like spiritual elevation, spiritual brightening. And then the Buddha would speak about heavenly realms. And actually, this whole sequence really ties into the heavenly realms part. Because, for instance, when the Buddha talked about rebirth, he used a metaphor of a clay pot being thrown into a lake. And the clay pot is a metaphor for the body. So this clay pot's going down a lake, and then it breaks when it hits the body, the bottom. And the first metaphor is that this pot's filled with rocks. So when it breaks, the rocks just go down. They're heavy. Another clay pot thrown into a river is filled with butter. So when it hits the bottom, the pot breaks and the butter rises. And this was a metaphor for unwholesome karma and of wholesome karma. And the nature of how wholesome karma kind of leads to heavenly realms. This was a metaphor of how wholesome karma leads to better rebirths. So this person tuning in to the quality of generosity, the quality of virtue and goodness, they'd be experiencing this kind of like elevation of their heart, of their consciousness. And then the Buddha would then start speaking about the heavenly realms and this recognition of this like deva-like state. And deva literally means shining one, beings that are shining. So this person would be the like lightening and brightening of their chitta, of their heart, of their consciousness. And then the Buddha would start speaking about how this state that one is experiencing by tuning into this wholesomeness would is a correspondence to heavenly realms, towards higher rebirths. So just as the person would be connecting with that, they would have this visceral experience, direct experience of like how this wholesomeness leads to like a heightening of one's being. And then the Buddha would speak about the danger, the denigration, and defilement of sensuality. So this person that's kind of being elevated right now, generosity, virtue, heavenly realms, it's just like, then the Buddha would then talk about what pulls you down. What will pull you down from this lightening, elevation, and brightening? So then the person be getting this experience of this brighter heart, brighter chitta, lightening chitta, and then like we gain this wisdom of the forces that pull down the chitta towards coarser states. And then the Buddha would speak about the blessing of renunciation. So the Buddha starts talking about like these forces that can pull the chitta, pull our heart down into coarser states. This person who's like looking to rise, they're like really, tuned in with this talk. And then, and then the blessing of renunciation, of simplification, of going inwards, tuning into the blessing of renunciation, this path of going inwards, 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 to find this pure source of well being, this spring, this oasis of well being within us. So, the blessing of renunciation, the danger, denigration, and defilement of sensuality, going outwards to find our well being, our fulfillment. The metaphor most used for that is like mirages in the desert, chasing after these mirages. And the blessing of renunciation is going inwards to find the true oasis. And then again, after the Buddha would talk about generosity, virtue, heavenly realms, danger, denigration, defilement of sensuality, and the blessing of renunciation, it like directly says like that then the person's chitta is ready, malleable, free from hindrances, elevated and clear. And these are actually words that are very similar to the fourth jhana, the state after the fourth jhana, which is like a malleable state. It's described. Uh, Probably this is describing a kind of first jhana state or in between, kind of freed from the five hindrances state. And and this is when the Buddha would teach the Four Noble Truths. So this person's like freaking their chitta is very very bright, very elevated, unhindered, very prominent. And then the Buddha would teach the Four Noble Truths, like that this is suffering, this is the origin, craving, that there is a cessation, and this is the path leading to the cessation. And another metaphor that the Buddha would use for the stream entry experience was like of a chick breaking out of an egg. So this whole talk can also be, we could give a similarity to like, if we imagine like a chicken and egg, And this whole talk is almost like nourishing this chick so that it just grows, 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 grows. And then, very nice little image there, and actually perfect. And then when the Buddha would talk about the Four Noble Truths, it's almost like the chick is like, this is suffering, this is the origin, this is the cessation, this is the path. It's like the chick gets it's like grown so much, it's like ready to just break out of the egg. And actually, just like that image you showed, a chick is not, this is not we tend to have very exalted visions for awakening, but the Buddha so consistently used metaphors of the stream entry of being like their heart, their chitta, being like a baby, like a little chick that's just like kind of got his head out of the egg, his little feathers, his little wings, or of like a baby cow, a calf. And so the stream entry, when they break out, is birthed. The eye of Dhamma opening is not like I don't know, super lucid, expansive emptiness or something like that. It's kind of like so consistently the metaphor is of a baby-like thing coming out, actually. And so when the Buddha gave this Four Noble Truths, it's like the chitta's in this state of like actually quite free from suffering. It's been quite pulled out of samsara through this graduated discourse, step by step discourse that the Buddha's given. He's kind of like pulled them out to this like prime state to then from that state really be able to directly see how when the chitta clings, grasps, or gets entangled upon things, that this is what leads to suffering. And from this basis of this elevated, clear, bright chitta, unhindered chitta, similar to actually how the Buddha describes the fourth jhana, but this is kind of like a simpler state that he's describing here in this graduated discourse, in this offering of stream entry. This chitta state becomes the basis for the true understanding of the Four Noble Truths. And again, and when the Buddha offers these Four Noble Truths, it's the Buddha describes that it's like a clean cloth, like just taking on a dye. And actually, for this case, I'm going to say that the whole graduated discourse is kind of like someone bringing a white cloth and then this whole dye coming on it. And, that's something for us also to reflect upon while listening to the Dhamma. How much are we coming with a clean white cloth? How much are we coming with a cloth that we're looking to just get dyed? How often are we just coming with our opinions, perspectives, all of our this and that, blah, 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 restlessness, busyness? How much do we come with like humility and sincerity to just like for a cloth to just get fully dyed in the Dhamma? And so he says that this person, when they hear this generosity, virtue, heavenly realms, danger, denigration, defilement of sensuality, blessing of renunciation, this elevated chitta state, hearing the Four Noble Truths, they experience this opening of the eye of Dhamma, the Dhamma Chaku, the Dhamma eye opens. And again in the suttas, this phrase is repeated that the stream entry experience is the opening of the Dhamma eye. And again, other metaphors for the stream entry being this chick, baby chick coming out of the egg, or a baby cow that has just been born. And also in most of the cases of awakening, that are the most common patterns, dynamics, sequences in early Buddhism, is that awakening, the basis of it is what they call parisuddham pariodatanang chittang, of a pure, bright chitta. So the chitta, the heart, is kind of like the place in which this opening of the eye of Dhamma, opening of the eye of wisdom, opening of the light of wisdom, panyaloka. It comes forth from this when we can experience a prominent purity and brightness of heart. And what I really like about the graduated discourse here is, so often in the suttas they describe this pure bright chitta, pure bright heart, as a fourth jhana, like the fully actualized fourth jhana. But here, actually, someone's experiencing this elevated, pure heart, actually from the full absorption of generosity, the full absorption of virtue, the full absorption of like that heavenly, that butter-like karma, that light, elevating, rising karma, this understanding of what denigrates our heart, and this turning inwards, this real appreciation and blessing of renunciation, is what actually gives this sufficient base of the pure bright chitta for the stream entry experience.